Body Knows episode 22, Desire and Fear. The push-pull of intimacy. Welcome back to The Body Knows. In this episode, we enter one of the most human paradoxes, the longing for closeness and the simultaneous fear of being seen. Desire and fear often live side by side in the body, especially in love, intimacy, and connection. The paradox of intimacy. For some, this paradox feels like a lifelong battle. For others, it shows up only in particular moments. A silence in the middle of a conversation, a hand reaching out to touch, the stillness before a kiss. The heart says yes, but the body says not yet. The body's blueprint for intimacy. From the moment we're born, our bodies are wired to seek connection. Neuroscience tells us that oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, floods an infant's system during touch, softening stress responses and anchoring trust. The vagus nerve, which governs safety cues in the body, learns to recognize the tone of a caregiver's voice, the rhythm of their breathing, and the warmth of their presence. This is the foundation of attachment. The nervous system maps safety and danger through relationships. If those early maps are secure, intimacy later in life often feels easier. But if those early maps were unpredictable, sometimes safe, sometimes dangerous, the nervous system carries the uncertainty forward. Desire becomes intertwined with fear. Closeness feels magnetic but also unsafe. Desire. The pull toward closeness. Desire is not just about sex, though that is one powerful form. Desire is about the body's longing for resonance. It's the nervous system's yearning for co-regulation, for another heartbeat nearby, another breath to sync with, another nervous system to remind us that we're not alone. Dopamine fuels this pull. It fires in anticipation of closeness, rewarding pursuit, motivating risk. Oxytocin deepens the bond once we connect, reinforcing trust and soothing anxiety. In evolutionary terms, desire has kept our species alive. We bond, we reproduce, we nurture. But desire isn't purely physical. It's existential. It whispers, I want to be known. I want to be seen. I want to be met. Fear, the instinct to protect, yet alongside desire is its twin, fear. The amygdala, our brain's threat detector, scans for danger even in moments of intimacy. If early experiences linked closeness with pain, rejection, neglect, betrayal, then the body never fully relaxes in the presence of love. Here, fear is not irrational. It is the body remembering. The nervous system has learned that opening the heart can come at a cost. A harsh tone, a cold silence, a sudden absence, all of these can condition the body to brace against vulnerability. This is why someone may crave touch but flinch when it arrives. Why a partner's affection can trigger unease rather than comfort. Why love can feel like both a sanctuary and a threat. The push-pull dance of intimacy. This paradox often plays out in what psychologists call anxious and avoidant attachment. The anxious partner reaches, driven by fear of abandonment. The avoidant partner withdraws, driven by fear of being overwhelmed or trapped. Each reinforces the other's fears, creating a cycle of pursuit and retreat. But beneath the labels is something simpler. Two nervous systems doing their best to survive. One says, don't leave me. The other says, don't swallow me. Both are trying to keep the self intact. Both are strategies written long before the present relationship began. This is the push-pull dance. Longing and recoil, closeness and distance, desire and fear. Cultural mirrors of the paradox culture shapes how this dance plays out. In Western individualist societies, independence is prized. Vulnerability is often framed as weakness. People are encouraged to stand on their own, making intimacy more fraught. In collectivist cultures, intimacy is often woven into rituals of belonging, shared meals, extended family bonds, and communal living. Yet here too, fear can emerge in the form of enmeshment, where individuality feels threatened. Even philosophy mirrors the paradox. Existentialists like Sartre warned of the look of the other, how being truly seen can feel like a kind of loss of freedom. Mystics, on the other hand, speak of intimacy as divine union, the dissolving of self into something greater. Both perspectives reveal the same tension. The human body yearns for closeness, and at the same time it fears the loss it might entail. Personal reflections. Living the paradox, I've known this paradox personally. Times when I longed to connect, but my body carried too much tension to let it happen. Times when I've stepped into intimacy only to feel the weight of old fears flooding in. One example stands out. Years ago, I was in a conversation with someone who kept repeating, "You're not interested in getting to know me." Inside, I knew this wasn't true. I was open, curious, and ready to engage. But their projection pressed against me like a wall. My body tightened, and old memories of not being welcomed came rushing back. In the past, I might have grown frustrated or tried harder to prove myself. But this time I breathed. I recognized the paradox in action, my desire to connect colliding with the fear triggered by their words. I chose to stay present, grounded, rather than spiraling into anger or collapse. And in that choice, something shifted. I realized that their words revealed their own fear, not mine. That my body could hold both desire and fear without breaking. Moments like this have taught me that intimacy is not just about closeness with others. It's about closeness with myself, trusting that I can remain present even when fear stirs, setting the stage. In this episode, we'll explore how desire and fear live together in the nervous system, how they shape our relationships, and how we can begin to hold intimacy without collapse. We'll break down a scenario that many know too well, wanting touch but flinching away. We'll look at the science of why this happens, the psychology of attachment that underpins it, and the lived experience of navigating intimacy in real time. We'll also widen the lens, examining how culture, philosophy, and spirituality all frame intimacy as both risk and gift. And I'll share more of my personal journey because I believe the body's truths are best understood not just in theory but in story. The paradox of intimacy is not a problem to be solved, but a rhythm to be understood, a push and pull that can teach us where we hurt, but also where we heal. So let's begin. Let's step into this dance together with compassion for the body's wisdom, its longing, its fear, and its unbreakable drive for connection. Scenario: wanting touch but flinching away the moment of contradiction. Picture this. A quiet evening. You've had a long day, you feel drained, perhaps even raw. The thought of touch, a hand on your arm, an embrace, someone's presence leaning in, feels like the one thing that could bring comfort. You want closeness, your body aches for it. But when it arrives, something shifts. The hand on your shoulder feels too heavy. The embrace feels suffocating. Muscles tense, breath tightens, and almost before you can think, you pull away. This is the paradox in its purest form. Wanting tactile touch but recoiling when it comes. To the one offering touch, it may look confusing or rejected. To the one receiving, it feels like survival. Step 1. The anticipation of touch. In the moments before contact, desire often dominates. Dopamine rises in expectation of connection. The nervous system prepares for regulation through another's presence. This is why imagining touch can feel soothing, why remembering a loved one's embrace can calm the heart rate. But anticipation also primes the body to scan. The amygdala remains on guard, monitoring not just what is wanted, but what might go wrong. If intimacy has ever been paired with hurt, neglect, or betrayal, anticipation carries tension alongside longing. Step 2. The contact itself. When touch arrives, oxytocin floods the system. In safety, this hormone lowers cortisol, slows the heart, and eases the body into trust. Touch, in its ideal form, is one of the most powerful regulators we know. Yet the body does not receive touch in the abstract. It receives it in context. Who is touching? How are they touching? What has come before? If the nervous system associates the person with pain, or if the relationship has unresolved tension, the oxytocin response is hijacked by the amygdala's warning signals. Touch that should soothe becomes threatening. Step 3. The recoil. This is where the flinch emerges. Muscles contract, breath shortens, and skin feels hypersensitive. The vagus nerve switches from its social engagement mode into defense. The body pulls away, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. The flinch is not rejection in the moral sense. It is the nervous system saying, this does not feel safe right now. Even if the mind longs for closeness, the body refuses to override its protective coding. Step 4. The aftermath. For the person offering touch, the recoil can feel like rejection. They may feel hurt, confused, or even unloved. For the person recoiling, guilt or shame often follows. Why can't I just accept comfort? Why do I push away what I want most? This cycle reinforces itself. The more guilt and shame accompany the flinch, the harder it is to trust touch in the future. The nervous system learns that intimacy comes with a cost. Not only the risk of being hurt, but the risk of being misunderstood. Personal reflection, touch, and trigger. In my own life, I've known this paradox intimately. I am a tactile person. I enjoy touch, I find comfort in it, and I've often sought it as a way to feel safe and connected. But once I've been triggered, once someone has hurt me, dismissed me, or pushed against my boundaries, touch no longer feels soothing. In those moments, I don't want to be held. I don't want to be stroked or embraced. Any attempt at physical closeness feels like reinforcement of the pain. It becomes unbearable. I've had experiences where a partner or friend has tried to comfort me with touch after being the very source of my hurt. To them it seemed natural. To me it felt suffocating like salt on a wound. This is the nervous system at work. It is not that I stopped being tactile. It is that my body remapped touch in that moment as unsafe. No amount of words could override it. The flinch wasn't a choice, it was survival. And yet trying to explain this often deepened the pain, because others could not see the physiological reality underneath. When desire turns to defense, this experience shows a profound truth. Desire for touch does not erase the body's need for safety. We can want closeness and still reject it if the nervous system associates it with harm. This is why someone might crave intimacy in imagination but recoil in practice. It is also why betrayal in relationships is so devastating. It rewrites the body's map of safety with that person, sometimes permanently. Neuroscientific research backs this up. Studies show that oxytocin, while often called the love hormone, actually amplifies social memory. If someone has been kind, oxytocin strengthens trust. If someone has been cruel, oxytocin strengthens the memory of betrayal, deepening fear. The same chemical that bonds us can also reinforce avoidance when paired with hurt. Attachment in action attachment theory provides language for this. An anxious partner may crave touch but fear abandonment. An avoidant partner may resist touch to guard their autonomy. In disorganized attachment, both impulses coexist, a desperate reaching and a sudden recoil. But beyond the labels, what we see in the scenario of wanting to touch but flinching away is attachment in real time. The body remembers. The body chooses safety. The body protects, even when the mind feels betrayed by its own reflexes. Philosophical resonances philosophers, too, have wrestled with this paradox. Emmanuel Levinas spoke of the face-to-face encounter as both revelation and danger. To meet another is to risk being undone. In intimacy, we open ourselves to the possibility of being shaped, even harmed, by another's gaze, touch, or presence. Mystical traditions echo this tension. In Sufi poetry, intimacy with the divine is described as both ecstasy and annihilation. The self dissolves in love, but not without fear. In Taoist philosophy, yin and yang embody the same dynamic: closeness and distance, attraction and retreat, desire and defense. The flinch, then, is not just biological but existential. It reflects our deepest human condition, the longing to merge and the longing to remain intact. A wider lens, society, and touch, our cultural conditioning shapes how we interpret the flinch. In some cultures, physical touch is frequent, casual, and woven into daily life. A flinch here may be read as a clear rejection. In more touch-avoidant cultures, the same recoil may go unnoticed. Modern Western society complicates this further. On one hand, touch is sexualized, leaving little room for platonic or nurturing intimacy. On the other hand, many live in touch-deprived lives, isolated, working online, substituting digital contact for physical. In this context, the paradox of wanting touch but fearing it becomes even sharper. The body starves for closeness but mistrusts it when it comes. Personal growth through awareness. For me, understanding this paradox has been liberating. Where I once blamed myself for being too sensitive or difficult, I now see that my body was speaking truth. The flinch was not betrayal, it was wisdom. Learning to communicate this has been harder. Not everyone understands that a tactile person can also reject touch. Not everyone sees that safety is not static, that it shifts moment to moment. But the more I've learned to trust my body's signals, the less guilt I carry. I no longer feel the need to apologize for flinching. Instead, I explain, I want closeness, but I need safety first. Without safety, touch feels like pain. This is not rejection of the other, but protection of myself. Toward compassion, ultimately, this scenario teaches us that intimacy cannot be forced. Desire cannot override fear. The body will always choose survival first. And that choice deserves compassion, not shame. When we see the flinch not as rejection, but as protection, we create space for healing. We allow intimacy to grow at the body's pace, not at the pace of expectation. We learn that sometimes the most loving thing is not to insist on touch, but to listen to the body's no. In the next part of this episode, we'll widen the frame to see how this push-pull dynamic plays out across relationships. Not just in individual moments, but in patterns that repeat over time, anxious and avoidant dances, cycles of pursuit and retreat, and the echoes of childhood attachment playing out in adult love. Intimacy is not only about the moment of touch. It is about the rhythms we live in, the patterns we replay, and the possibilities we have to create something new. The push-pull dance in relationships are often described as dances. We step toward each other, step back, move in rhythm, sometimes stumble. But unlike a choreographed dance, intimacy is improvised. Each move is guided by the nervous system's reading cues, predicting danger and reaching for safety. The dance of opposites. The push-pull dance is one of the most common rhythms in human connection. One partner leans in, craving closeness. The other leans back, needing space. The pursuer feels abandoned, the distancer feels suffocated. The harder one pulls, the harder the other pushes. This is not a sign of weakness or incompatibility. It is the nervous system's logic in action. Desire pulls forward, fear pulls back. And together, they form a pattern as old as attachment itself. Attachment as a map of the dance attachment theory gives us a language for this dance. The anxious partner tends to pursue. They reach, ask, question, and demand. Their nervous system is tuned to abandonment. Silence feels like danger, distance feels like rejection. For them, closeness means safety. The avoidant partner tends to withdraw. They step back, disengage, retreat. Their nervous system is tuned to overwhelm. Too much closeness feels suffocating, like losing oneself. For them, space means safety. When these two meet, and they often do, the dance becomes self-reinforcing. The more one reaches, the more the other withdraws. The more one withdraws, the more the other reaches. Both feel trapped. Both feel misunderstood. Disorganized attachment complicates the dance further. Here, both impulses coexist within one body. A person may crave closeness in one moment and recoil the next, leaving both themselves and their partner bewildered. Secure attachment, meanwhile, provides the most flexible rhythm. Partners move together and apart fluidly, without panic. But even secure individuals can fall into push-pull patterns under stress, because the nervous system always prioritizes survival. Scenario 1. The silent treatment. Imagine a conflict. One partner grows quiet, withdrawing into silence. To them, it feels like self-protection. They fear saying the wrong thing, escalating the fight, or losing themselves in the heat of the moment. Silence becomes a shield. To the other, silence feels like abandonment. Their nervous system reads the absence of response as danger. Cortisol rises, the amygdala fires, and panic sets in. They pursue harder, raising their voice, pressing for answers, demanding engagement. The more one withdraws, the more the other pursues. Neither is wrong. Both are protecting themselves. But the dance escalates until both feel trapped in patterns they didn't consciously choose. Scenario 2. The overwhelming embrace. Consider the example you shared, being tactile, enjoying touch, yet rejecting it when triggered. In a relationship, this often plays out when one partner tries to repair through physical closeness after a hurt. They reach for a hug or a gentle touch, hoping to soothe. But for the one who has been hurt, the same touch reinforces the wound. The body stiffens, recoils, rejects. To the toucher, it feels confusing. I'm trying to comfort you. To the one recoiling, it feels invasive. You're ignoring the pain you caused. This is push-pull in its rawest form. One body seeks repair through closeness. The other seeks safety through distance. Both want connection. Both fear the cost of it. Scenario 3. The cycle of pursuit and retreat. In some relationships, the push-pull becomes a daily rhythm. The anxious partner sends frequent messages, checking in, needing reassurance. The avoidant partner delays replies, craving space, needing to breathe. The anxious partner reads the delay as rejection and pushes harder. The avoidant partner reads the pressure as suffocation and withdraws further. This is not about logic. Both may know intellectually that they love each other, but their bodies are running different programs. One says, don't leave me. The other says, don't trap me. And unless the pattern is recognized, it can spiral until both feel exhausted. The nervous system in the dance. What makes these scenarios powerful is that they are not just psychological, they are physiological. For the pursuer, cortisol spikes during distance. The vagus nerve struggles to regulate. Anxiety rises until pursuit feels irresistible. For the distancer, cortisol spikes during closeness. The amygdala interprets intimacy as threat. Withdrawal feels like survival. For the disorganized, both spikes occur. Closeness and distance both feel dangerous. The body toggles between pursuit and retreat, often in the same conversation. Understanding this reframes the dance. It is not stubbornness, it is not malice, it is biology. Cultural scripts of push and pull culture amplifies these dynamics. In Western societies, the media often glorifies the push-pull dance as passion. Films show lovers arguing intensely, breaking apart, then reuniting in a fiery embrace. The drama is framed as evidence of true love. In collectivist cultures, the push-pull may emerge differently. Here the pressure is often external: family expectations, communal obligations, cultural norms. The individual may crave space but feel pulled back by duty, or crave closeness but be pushed away by stigma. Even spiritual traditions carry echoes of this dance. In Christian mysticism, the soul longs for union with God but fears being consumed. In Buddhism, intimacy is seen as both liberation and risk. The ego resists even as the heart opens. My reflections. Seeing the dance in myself, I have known both sides of this dance. I have been the pursuer, wanting words, clarity, reassurance. And I have been the distancer, needing quiet, needing space, recoiling when closeness felt like pressure. Looking back, I see how much of this came not from the present moment, but from the past. Silence reminded me of childhood absence. Demands for closeness reminded me of times when my boundaries were ignored. The nervous system doesn't distinguish then from now. It simply reacts. But I've also seen how awareness can shift the dance. In moments where I once would have pursued, I've paused, breathed, recognized my body's alarm, and chosen to wait. In moments where I once would have withdrawn, I've stayed, spoken gently, named my need for space without disappearing. These are small shifts, but they change the rhythm. Breaking the pattern, the push-pull dance is powerful, but not inevitable. Awareness is the first step. Naming the pattern allows both partners to see it for what it is. Not rejection, not abandonment, but nervous system seeking safety. Communication is the second step. Saying, I need closeness or I need space with honesty and compassion reframes the conflict. It turns the dance from unconscious reaction into conscious negotiation. The third step is co-regulation. Learning to calm each other's nervous systems through tone, breath, and presence helps dissolve the fear that fuels the cycle. Sometimes this means holding each other. Sometimes it means giving space. The wisdom is in listening. Toward compassion, the push-pull dance reveals one of the deepest truths of intimacy, that love is not simply about wanting. It is about safety. Until the body feels safe, desire will always be shadowed by fear. Compassion grows when we understand this. Instead of blaming ourselves or our partners, we see the dance as a reflection of survival strategies. We remember that beneath the push and the pull is the same longing, to be loved without losing ourselves. The nervous system in relationship patterns personal reflection. Over the years, I've become more and more aware of the attachment cycles people bring into relationships. In the past, I was much more inclined to prioritize connection above all else. I would sense the misalignments, the discomfort, the body's whispers telling me something wasn't quite right. But I'd override those signals. I told myself that if I just gave more time, more patience, more effort, eventually we would work through it. Cycles of attachment, seen in hindsight time, I thought, was the ingredient that healed. If only I waited long enough, if only I poured myself in fully, the difficulties would dissolve. This was the old story I told myself. But with healing and self-reflection, I've come to see that intimacy is not just about the passing of time. It's about energy. It's about the state of being two people bring into the present moment. And those signals, the energy, the tone, the state of nervous system regulation, show themselves immediately. What took me months or years to learn in past relationships, I now see in real time. Energy is immediate, not deferred. This shift came when I started listening not just to words, not just to promises, but to what my body felt in the first exchanges. The nervous system doesn't wait 6 months to give feedback. It reacts in the moment. If someone is secure in themselves, their tone, their presence, and their energy reflect that. If someone is dysregulated, defensive, or avoidant, that too is revealed, often in subtle cues, a change in posture, a delayed response, or an inconsistency in action versus word. I used to brush those signals aside. Now I trust them, not as judgments of character, but as indicators of where someone is in their journey. If someone shows early signs of disrespect, projection, or refusal to self-reflect, I no longer persuade myself to give it time. Time doesn't fix misalignment, presence does. And if presence is fractured at the start, the cracks only deepen over time. The end of second chances I used to give second, third, and fourth chances. I told myself this was compassion, or loyalty, or resilience. But in truth, it was avoidance, avoidance of what my body already knew. Each second chance was me ignoring the nervous system's wisdom. Each repetition was me postponing the inevitable while draining myself of energy. Now I live differently. If someone shows through their actions that they cannot or will not meet me with respect, love, or authenticity, I act in real time. I no longer extend endless chances for change when the pattern is clear. This is not cruelty, it is clarity. When people say I am fickle, uncaring, or mean for stepping away quickly, I recognize those words for what they are: projections. They are not reflections of who I am, but of what the other person cannot yet face in themselves. My decision to step back is not a lack of care. It is an affirmation of my worth, my boundaries, and my need to live in relationships that support mutual growth rather than trap me in cycles of pain, immaturity, systemic abuse, and projection. Through this lens, I've also come to see how much immaturity exists in adult relationships. This is not an insult, but an observation. Many people have never been taught to regulate their nervous systems, to process their trauma, or to examine the ways they repeat childhood attachment patterns. Instead, they carry those patterns forward unconsciously, projecting their unhealed wounds onto others. I don't take this personally anymore. When someone dismisses me, mocks me, or accuses me of things that aren't true, I see it as part of a larger system of abuse, one that stretches far beyond the individual. We live in a culture that encourages denial, projection, and manipulation. People aren't just acting from their own pain. They are often enacting scripts that have been instilled by societal conditioning, by media narratives, by family systems, by systemic neglect. Seen this way, personal rejection doesn't sting as it once did. It is no longer about me in the way it once felt. It is about the interplay of nervous systems caught in cycles of fear, control, and survival, fatal attraction, and the ego's desire. One of the most dangerous traps in all of this is what I've called fatal attraction. These are the bonds forged not in authentic love, but in toxicity, where attraction is fueled by projection, where the ego clings to another not out of trust, but out of desperation to stay whole. The ego resists surrender because surrender feels like death. It resists being mirrored because to be seen too clearly is to have its illusions stripped away. In toxic bonds, attraction thrives on this resistance. The dance becomes addictive. Pursue, retreat, punish, reconcile, repeat. It feels passionate, but it is poison. I've lived through these dynamics, and I've witnessed them in others. I've seen how people mistake drama for depth, chaos for chemistry, and power games for passion. And I've seen how those dynamics are reinforced by culture itself, through films, through music, through stories that glorify unstable relationships as proof of true love. But I no longer participate. I see these traps for what they are: weapons of the establishment, systems of control that keep people fragmented, exhausted, unable to truly unite. Love traps as weapons of control. This is where my reflections cross into the wider analysis I've shared in the Inversiverse. The push-pull of intimacy is not just personal, not just psychological. It is political. The same mechanisms that keep individuals stuck in toxic relationships are mirrored at the level of society. Just as an abuser conditions their partner through cycles of reward and punishment, So too do governments and institutions condition populations through approval and withdrawal, validation, and gaslighting. Just as a toxic lover blames their partner for the pain they themselves create, so too do leaders project their failings onto citizens, blaming them for unrest while masking the root causes. When we understand relationships through this systemic lens, we see that love traps are not accidental. They are reinforced by cultural narratives designed to keep people in cycles of confusion and dependency. And the most radical act of resistance is to step out of the cycle, to refuse to play the game, to choose clarity over chaos. Where I stand now. So, where do I stand now after years of reflection, healing, and trial? I stand in a place of security within myself. I am no longer desperate to prove my worth through another's acceptance. I no longer chase validation through endless second chances. I no longer confuse drama with love. Instead, I listen to my body in real time. If a connection feels unsafe, I trust that. If a person shows me their refusal to grow, I accept it and step back. If accusations or projections come, I do not absorb them. I see them for what they are, attempts to make me carry pain that is not mine. This is not detachment in the cold sense. I still care deeply. I still value intimacy. I still desire connection. But I know that authentic intimacy cannot grow in the soil of disrespect, projection, or denial. I would rather walk away early than waste years in cycles that only reinforce wounds. Compassion without compromise. And yet I also hold compassion. I don't demonize those who act from immaturity or projection. I understand that most of us are products of systemic abuse, cultural conditioning, and unhealed trauma. But compassion does not mean compromise. I can care for someone and still refuse to stay entangled in their cycle. I can understand their pain without making it mine to carry. This balance of compassion without compromise, of love without entrapment, is where my healing has led me. It is where my nervous system feels at home. It is where intimacy becomes possible again, not as chaos, but as sanctuary. The push-pull dance will always exist. Desire and fear are written into our biology, our cultures, our stories. But we have a choice in how we engage with it. We can repeat cycles unconsciously, or we can listen to what the body knows. For me, that has meant stepping away sooner, listening more deeply, and trusting my own signals. It has meant seeing projections for what they are, and refusing to lose myself in another's illusions. It has meant choosing clarity over chaos, security over drama, self-trust over endless compromise. And perhaps most importantly, it has meant discovering that intimacy begins not with another, but with myself. When I am secure in who I am, when I validate my own feelings, when I accept myself fully, then connection with others is no longer about survival. It is about presence. It is about love in its truest sense, compassionate, respectful, alive. The nervous system as a social organ. When we talk about intimacy, we often picture it as two minds trying to understand each other. But beneath the conversations, beneath the words and gestures, two nervous systems are constantly interacting. The body is not silent in love. It hums, it contracts, it signals safety or threat long before the mind names it. This is why relationships often feel so magnetic or so unsettling from the very beginning. Our nervous systems are like tuning forks, vibrating in response to one another. A calm presence can soothe us. A tense or chaotic presence can set us on edge. We may not consciously understand why, but our bodies know. Neuroscientist Stephen Porges describes this in his polyvagal theory. Humans are wired for co-regulation. Our vagus nerves, those great communicators of calm, respond to cues from others. A soft tone of voice, an open facial expression, and a relaxed posture can quiet our alarms. Harsh tones, cold eyes, or dismissive body language can trigger danger responses even when no explicit threat is present. This means intimacy is not just a story we tell ourselves. It is a physiological state, shared and shaped between bodies. Co-regulation and dysregulation. In healthy relationships, co-regulation feels like safety. Two people soothe one another, not through effort, but through presence. A sigh, a gentle touch, an unforced silence. These can calm the heart rate, soften the muscles, and release tension. But the opposite is also true. Dysregulation between partners can amplify stress. One person's anxiety can heighten the other's avoidance. One partner's withdrawal can inflame the other's pursuit. Instead of calming each other, nervous systems spiral together into greater chaos. This is where the push-pull becomes entrenched. The anxious partner feels rejected, their body moving into panic. The avoidant partner feels suffocated, their body tightening into retreat. Each reaction feeds the other. The more one clings, the more the other withdraws. And because these responses are physiological before they are conscious, they are extremely difficult to stop once the cycle begins. The tragedy is that both partners usually want the same thing: safety, connection, belonging. But their nervous systems are reading opposite signals, creating a loop of mistrust and pain, repetition compulsion, the past in the present. Why do we so often find ourselves in the same kinds of relationships, replaying the same painful dynamics? Freud called this repetition compulsion. The tendency to unconsciously seek out situations that mirror old wounds in an attempt to resolve them. The nervous system explains this in biological terms. When a child experiences inconsistent love, their body learns to anticipate both closeness and rejection. As adults, they unconsciously gravitate toward partners who recreate that unpredictability because it feels familiar. The body says, I know this dance. Maybe this time it will end differently, but without awareness, it rarely does. The cycle repeats: longing, disappointment, despair. The very partners we choose in hope of healing become the ones who reopen the wound. This isn't masochism. It's the body's desperate attempt to finish an old story, trauma bonding. When pain feels like love, in its most extreme form, this cycle becomes trauma bonding. Here the nervous system fuses intimacy with survival because love has been paired with pain. A partner who alternates between warmth and cruelty, attention and neglect, creates the same chemical loop as an addictive drug. Dopamine spikes with each reward, cortisol surges with each punishment, and the body becomes hooked on the cycle itself. This is why leaving such relationships can feel impossible, even when the mind knows they are harmful. The nervous system has come to equate danger with connection. The push-pull becomes not just a pattern, but a prison. Fresh scenarios of the push-pull: imagine a couple at dinner. One partner makes a light joke, but the other hears it as criticism. Their shoulders tighten, their tone sharpens. The first partner, sensing tension, leans in to reassure, but their closeness only heightens the other's alarm. Within minutes, what began as play has spiraled into conflict. Neither partner wanted this, but their nervous systems reacted faster than their minds could interpret. Or picture two friends. One withdraws during a stressful period, not out of malice but out of overwhelm. The other interprets the silence as abandonment, flooding with anxiety. They send a barrage of messages, trying to pull the friend back. Instead of soothing, the intensity drives the friend further into retreat. Both feel misunderstood, both feel unsafe, and the friendship begins to fray. These scenarios show how the push-pull isn't confined to romance. It is a nervous system pattern that shapes every form of relationship. Breaking the loop through awareness is the first step in interrupting these patterns. When we recognize that what feels personal is often physiological, compassion opens. Instead of seeing a partner's retreat as rejection, we can understand it as their nervous system seeking safety. Instead of seeing a friend's pursuit as intrusion, we can recognize it as their body's way of crying out for connection. But awareness alone is not enough. The body must be taught new rhythms. This is where practices of self-regulation and co-regulation come in. Grounding exercises, breathing together, setting boundaries with clarity and kindness. Each small act begins to rewrite the script. My reflection: choosing clarity over cycles. In my own journey, I've come to see these patterns play out again and again. I used to believe that persistence was proof of love, that if I just stayed, if I just gave more, eventually things would shift. But what I was really doing was replaying an old script, ignoring the body's signals, hoping time would rewrite the ending. Now I approach relationships differently. I don't wait for the 100th repetition to accept what the first interaction already revealed. I look for energy, for alignment, for mutual respect in the present. And if the pattern is unhealthy, I step away sooner with less guilt. This doesn't mean I've given up on intimacy. It means I've learned to distinguish between true connection and trauma repetition. It means I value relationships that regulate rather than destabilize. It means I honor my body's knowledge, even when my mind wants to override it. Relationship patterns are not random. They are written in nervous systems, replayed across generations, amplified by culture. But they are not destiny. With awareness, compassion, and practice, we can learn new dances. We can move from cycles of pain to patterns of safety. Because intimacy, at its best, is not a battlefield between desire and fear. It is a rhythm where two nervous systems learn to rest together, healing pathways from awareness to action. Understanding the nervous system dynamics of intimacy is the first step. Recognizing how desire and fear are braided together, how repetition, compulsion, or trauma bonding keeps us caught, gives us language for what was once invisible. But awareness, while powerful, is not enough on its own. The body does not change through insight alone. It learns through experience. Healing requires new patterns, new rhythms, new practices that retrain the nervous system to find safety in connection. Somatic practices, teaching the body safety. The nervous system does not speak in words, it speaks in sensation. That means healing begins with practices that address the body directly. One of the simplest is grounding, placing bare feet on the floor, noticing weight, texture, and temperature. This tells the body, I'm here, I'm supported. Another is orienting, gently turning the head, letting the eyes scan the environment, and naming what is seen. This signals to the amygdala that there is no immediate threat. Breathwork is another doorway. Slow, deep exhalations stimulate the vagus nerve, activating the parasympathetic branch that calms the heart rate. Paired with gentle movement, stretching, rocking, or walking breath can shift the body from collapse into presence. These small practices, repeated often, begin to reshape the nervous system's default settings. They make it possible to remain present in moments that once triggered flight or freeze. Co-regulation, healing in relationship, but no one heals in isolation. Just as wounds often form in relationships, so too does repair. Co-regulation is central here, allowing another person's calm presence to help soothe one's own nervous system. This can happen in therapy, in friendship, or in love. Safe touch is one form. Holding hands, leaning into a steady shoulder, resting in a hug that expects nothing in return. Even shared silence can be co-regulating when it is warm and unforced. Communication matters too. Naming sensations out loud, I feel tight in my chest, my body wants to run, invites the other person into the inner experience. When that sharing is met with empathy rather than judgment, trust deepens. The nervous system learns, I can reveal and I am still safe. Of course, co-regulation requires discernment. Not every person is capable of offering it. Part of healing is learning to choose wisely, to seek relationships that soothe rather than inflame, to recognize when another's chaos is too much to hold. Therapeutic pathways. Naming and rewriting scripts formal therapy can provide structured spaces for this work. Somatic experiencing, EMDR, internal family systems, and polyvagal informed therapies all aim to reconnect body and mind, sensation and story. They help clients notice when they are in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn and practice moving into safety. Therapy also shines a light on the scripts we replay unconsciously. By naming repetition compulsion, I keep choosing partners who withdraw when I need closeness. We gain freedom to choose differently. By tracking triggers, a raised voice sends me back to childhood. We begin to separate past from present. These practices do not erase wounds, but they loosen their grip. They allow intimacy to become less about survival and more about genuine connection. Spiritual and creative pathways beyond therapy. Many find healing through spiritual or creative practices. Meditation teaches presence, noticing thoughts and sensations without judgment, allowing them to rise and fall. Prayer, ritual, or chanting can create rhythms that regulate breath and heart, offering sanctuary for the nervous system. Creativity functions similarly. Writing, painting, and dancing allow expression where words fall short. A trembling hand that cannot explain itself in language can release its truth in a brushstroke. A body that flinches in conversation can reclaim fluidity through movement. For me, spirituality has been especially powerful. My own awakening showed me how fragmented I had become, how much of myself had been hidden behind masks of performance and survival. The path of rebuilding was not linear, but it taught me that healing is not about perfection. It is about learning to inhabit myself fully, shadows and all, and trusting that in doing so I help others to do the same. Relearning intimacy without collapse. At the heart of healing, the push-pull of intimacy is this: relearning that closeness does not have to equal collapse. The body must be shown, gently and repeatedly, that touch can be safe, that silence can be non-threatening, that vulnerability does not always lead to betrayal. This is slow work. It involves pausing in moments of tension, taking a breath instead of reacting, and choosing to share rather than withdraw. It means allowing desire to be felt without shame, and fear to be acknowledged without domination. It also means boundaries. Intimacy is not about merging into another, but about standing in one's own body fully and inviting another to do the same. Boundaries are not walls. They are the clarity that makes closeness sustainable. Healing the nervous system's patterns of intimacy is both deeply personal and profoundly collective. Each time one person learns to regulate rather than repeat, to respond rather than react, a small shift happens in the larger web of connection. The cycles that once perpetuated harm begin to unravel. Desire and fear will always coexist. They are not enemies, but companions on the path of love. The task is not to eliminate fear, but to walk with it without letting it rule. To let the body know again and again, intimacy can be safe. Connection can be a sanctuary. Love can be lived without losing oneself, holding desire and fear together. As we draw this episode to a close, I want to return to the heart of what we've explored together, the nervous system's paradox of intimacy. That deep human longing to be close, to be touched, to be seen, alongside the reflexive recoil, the tightening, the fear that says, if I let you in, I might lose myself. If I reveal myself, I might be rejected. Desire and fear are not opposites. They are woven together in the fibers of our bodies, etched into neural circuits shaped long before we knew words. To desire is to risk, to fear is to protect. And both arise from the same place, the body's determination to survive. In this episode, we've traced how that paradox plays out in culture, philosophy, and spirituality. We've seen how intimacy is ritualized in relationships, amplified in society, and even weaponized in politics. We've explored how co-regulation can soothe and how dysregulation can spiral. We've looked at trauma loops, repetition compulsions, and the ways we sometimes confuse danger for love. But more importantly, we've remembered that these patterns are not destiny. They are not the final word. The nervous system is not set in stone. It can teach new rhythms. And every breath, every boundary, every compassionate encounter has the potential to reshape the story, living with the paradox, not against it. The aim of this work isn't to erase fear. It isn't to somehow cleanse ourselves of the discomfort that intimacy brings. To do so would be to deny something deeply human. Instead, the task is to live with the paradox, to hold both desire and fear in the same body without collapsing into either. This means welcoming closeness while also honoring the self. It means respecting the body's signals without making them prisons. It means choosing relationships that soothe rather than inflame, without demanding perfection from ourselves or others. Fear will still whisper, desire will still call. But healing gives us the capacity to hear both without being ruled by either. Your story, my story, our story. If you've resonated with what I've shared, know that you are not alone. My own journey has been marked by this paradox again and again. Times when I longed for connection, but flinched from touch. Times when I stayed too long in relationships that mirrored old wounds, hoping repetition might transform into repair. Times when I mistook projection for truth, when someone else's accusations echoed my own hidden insecurities. But through healing, reflection, and the spiritual awakening that reoriented my life, I've learned to listen differently. I've learned that energy and presence matter more than time, that someone's attachment style often reveals itself early, and ignoring those cues only deepens the wound. That saying no, stepping back, or walking away isn't cruelty, it's compassion for myself and for the other. This is what integration looks like. It's not a polished story of triumph. It's not the fantasy of being fixed. It's the lived reality of falling, rising, learning, and continuing to choose wholeness, even when the old scripts try to pull me back. The role of compassion. If there's one thread I want to emphasize as we close, it is compassion. Compassion for ourselves, for the moments we clung too tightly or withdrew too quickly. Compassion for others who are often caught in the same nervous system traps, repeating the same unconscious scripts. Compassion doesn't excuse harm, but it does release us from the cycle of judgment that keeps fear alive. It allows us to see that we're all doing the best we can with the tools we've been given, and that healing comes not from condemnation, but from connection. Practices to carry forward. Before we end, I want to offer a few simple practices you can carry into your own relationships. Pause before reacting. When you feel the urge to cling or retreat, take one breath. Notice what your body is doing. That pause is power. Name what is real. Instead of accusing or withdrawing, try naming sensations. My chest feels tight. I notice I want to run. This invites honesty without blame. Seek co-regulation. Spend time with people whose presence calms you. Notice who steadies your breath, who softens your body, and choose those connections. Practice boundaries. Remember that saying no does not kill intimacy. It sustains it. Boundaries are the scaffolding that make closeness safe. These are not magic fixes. They are practices, repeated over time, that gently rewire the nervous system. Looking ahead, the language of boundaries. As we complete this exploration of intimacy's push and pull, we naturally arrive at the question of boundaries. If desire and fear are always in tension, how do we mark the line between closeness and safety? How do we communicate what we need, not as weapons or walls, but as invitations to healthier love? That is where we will go next. In episode 23, The Language of Boundaries, we'll dive into how the nervous system recognizes and responds to limits. We'll explore why saying no can feel so terrifying, why yes sometimes feels like surrender, and how to reclaim boundaries not as barriers but as bridges. Because without boundaries, intimacy collapses into enmeshment, and with rigid walls, intimacy suffocates. The art is in learning to speak the body's language of limits, clearly, kindly, and consistently. As always, I want to thank you for walking this path with me. These conversations are not easy, but they are necessary. They remind us that we are not broken machines needing fixing, but living bodies carrying stories that long to be honored. You've been listening to The Body Knows. Until next time, I invite you to breathe, to notice, and to remember that your nervous system is not your enemy. It is your teacher, your protector, your guide. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the courage to reflect, to feel, to heal. And thank you for offering compassion not just to yourself, but to others who are also navigating the paradox of intimacy. Because when one body learns safety, it ripples outward. When one person heals, whole communities shift. James Miller.